Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining me today for this short presentation about dual language learners, pre-K and early childhood students who are multilingual learners. My name is Rebecca Carey. I'm currently serving as a Teacher Leader Fellow in the ESOL Multilingual and Bilingual Education Program through the Office of Teaching and Learning at the Maine Department of Education. My goals for this session are to briefly answer some of the most commonly asked technical assistance questions, particularly around the topics of identifying and serving multilingual learners in pre-K. I also want to give an overview of strong practices regarding culturally responsive actions, actions for family engagement, creating language-focused classrooms, and planning for the essentials of play and joyful learning in pre-K programs. Before I begin, please note that this slide deck is available for download, and by downloading, you will have access to all of the resources that are linked throughout. As this presentation is intended to be brief, the slides will also contain additional details which you may want to review later. Let's begin with the definition of dual language learners. Dual language learners are multilingual learners in early childhood. We call them dual language learners because children of this age are still developing in their primary languages, while also learning one or more additional languages. Let's look at multilingual learners who are in pre-K in the context of Maine schools. We know that there are a greater number of students who are identified as multilingual learners in Maine now more than ever. And there are a greater number of schools and districts throughout our state who now serve multilingual learners. This expansion applies to the number of multilingual learners who are enrolled in pre-K as well. Not only have we seen an increase in the number of multilingual learners in pre-K, but we've also seen a change in the students' own experiences and educational needs. We have seen an expansion of our number of multilingual learners who are enrolled in Maine public school pre-K programs. Between the years of 2023 and 2024, we saw an increase of over 26% in pre-K students who are identified as multilingual learners. This expansion of the number of pre-K students who are multilingual learners in Maine schools has raised some frequently asked questions. The first question is, must schools screen and identify pre-K students who may be multilingual learners? And the answer is yes. Just as with all other public school enrollments in Maine, the language use survey must be completed at the time of enrollment and should be included in all registration packets, whether paper or online. If a language other than English or in addition to English is noted, the student must be screened for English language proficiency. The Maine Department of Education recommends two screeners, the PreLAS or the PreIPT. Each school or district may choose which screener is best for their setting. Keep in mind that it is the district's responsibility to ensure that a screener is purchased and available, and that training occurs so that proper identification procedures can take place. Other frequently asked questions are, once a multilingual learner in pre-K is identified, must that student be served through the ESOL program? And must we develop an individual language acquisition plan for pre-K students who are multilingual learners? And again, the answer is yes. Overall, the same steps for identifying, developing, and implementing an educational program for multilingual learner students is the same, regardless of age or grade level. When we have multilingual learners in our pre-K classrooms, there are steps that we can take to create a language-focused, child-centered, and asset-based pre-K program. When we have multilingual learners in our pre-K programs, it's important that the programs are developed with trust, communication, and equity in mind. In addition, creating a setting where families and students' dynamic language and cultural practices are promoted and sustained is a priority. This work should happen in collaboration with multilingual families. WIDA offers an excellent self-paced workshop around the ideas of essential actions for pre-K and early childhood programs. I have identified some of the actions here, and you'll notice that they focus around examining your own beliefs as an educator, your actions and your own identities, looking at your setting and your programming, and working collaboratively to change bias and discrimination, whether it's in your resources, your policies, or your practices. Other essential actions center around knowing the students you serve, knowing and affirming their identities, their language, and their cultural practices. It is essential to work and communicate collaboratively with families to create an environment that is sustaining and welcoming. The overall goal is to provide curriculum and instruction that is both developmentally appropriate and also culturally and linguistically sustaining. To this end, we want to ensure that we use a variety of equitable tools so that we are observing and documenting multilingual children's learning and development over time. Family engagement is an essential component of a language-focused classroom. We want to be continually asking families about their goals, hopes, and fears, and concerns for their child's learning. Intentionally prioritizing two-way communication with parents, guardians, and caregivers creates a welcoming space where educators can ask parents about their preferences of languages and communication formats, and the best times for frequent check-ins. Again, focusing on family engagement, we can make sure that our communication is clear and without jargon that can be alienating. These factors allow for families to be involved in all aspects of their child's education. Let's ensure that we have spaces for families to gather and to engage with each other around their shared goals for their children. Our well-developed pathways for ongoing two-way communication with families around their child's learning and language, both at home and in school, will strengthen our knowledge of our students and our ability to serve them. In thinking about educational program, we want to have a language-focused approach as well as a child-centered approach. This involves knowing your students from the time of enrollment, gathering information, documenting information from parents, guardians, and caregivers. Even if the information seems anecdotal, we want to capture that information because it may be relevant to future conversations around the child's learning and/or behavior. Let's find out if the family have concerns about the child's learning at home. Does the family have insights that can help us as educators to better serve the students? The family, parents, guardians, and caregivers are children's first teachers, and they are the people who know the children best. We really want to tap into that knowledge and document it from the very first days of enrollment. Let's celebrate the students along with their families so that we can best serve them. The final note on this slide talks about language-focused observations. A language-focused observation is something that is available on the WIDA online self-paced workshop that I mentioned earlier about essential actions for pre-K through 3 students. The language-focused observation is a practice that allows you to gather information and use what you have learned to improve your planning, instruction, and assessment for your pre-K students who are multilingual learners. Language-focused observations are child-centered observations that focus on how a child is using language to make meaning and interact with others. I encourage you to explore the WIDA Pre-K through 3 Essential Actions workshop and find out more about using language-focused observations, which can provide ongoing formative assessment and information gathering for your multilingual learner. Finally, let's talk about the essential role of play and joyful learning. As we're planning for language-focused play with our multilingual learners in our pre-K classrooms, let's remember that a growing body of research recommends that children in pre-K through grade 3 need more opportunities to engage in joyful, play-based learning to support their development as well as their learning. In planning for a language-focused, playful learning space, ask, how do I plan for playful opportunities that are linguistically rich and allow for students to use all of their languaging skills? How do I model language and make language visible in support of new language learning through play? How do I incorporate language-focused observations? Multilingual children have the right to equitable, play-based learning opportunities that allow them to use their languages as a tool to play, learn, grow, and flourish as valued, unique individuals in the learning community. If we're planning for play as an opportunity for equity, we want to think about our own beliefs and practices as we ask ourselves some questions. For example, how do I plan for diverse types of play? How do I learn about and incorporate culturally responsive and linguistically dynamic play for learning? Overall, there are so many benefits to a language-focused and child-centered playful classroom. We know that this structure is responsive to children's developmental stages, their interests, their cultural and linguistic practices. It integrates content and language. It's an opportunity for authentic interactions. And it's a space where children can feel comfortable to experiment with and take risks with practicing all of their diverse language skills. Before we end this session, I'd like to highlight these resources and opportunities. There are a lot of wonderful resources here which can expand upon the topics I've touched on today. As I mentioned, WIDA has some wonderful self-paced workshops which are listed here. Thank you for spending your time with me today on this important topic, and thank you for the work that you do to support multilingual learners.